The Metropolitan Cathedral of Saints Vitus, Wenceslaus and Adalbert is a Roman Catholic metropolitan cathedral in Prague, the seat of the Archbishop of Prague. Up to 1997, the cathedral was dedicated only to Saint Vitus, and is still commonly named only as Saint Vitus Cathedral. This cathedral is an excellent example of Gothic architecture and is the biggest and most important church in the country. Located within Prague Castle and containing the tombs of many Bohemian kings and Holy Roman emperors, the cathedral is under the ownership of the Czech government as part of the Prague Castle complex. Cathedral dimensions are 124, 60 meters, the main tower is 96.5 meters high, front towers 82 m, arch height 33.2 m. Origins: the current cathedral is the third of a series of religious buildings at the site, all dedicated to Saint Vitus. The first church was an early Romanesque rotunda founded by Wenceslas I, Duke of Bohemia in 930. This patron saint was chosen because Wenceslas had acquired a holy relic the arm of Saint Vitus from Emperor Henry I. It is also possible that Wenceslas, wanting to convert his subjects to Christianity more easily, chose a saint whose name sounds very much like the name of Slavic solar deity Svantovit. Two religious populations, the increasing Christian and decreasing pagan community, lived simultaneously in Prague Castle at least until the 11th century. In the year 1060, as the Bishopric of Prague was founded, Prince Spishi II embarked on building a more spacious church, as it became clear the existing rotunda was too small to accommodate the faithful. A much larger and more representative Romanesque basilica was built in its spot. Though still not completely reconstructed, most experts agree it was a triple-aisled basilica with two choirs and a pair of towers connected to the western transept. The design of the cathedral nods to Romanesque architecture of the Holy Roman Empire, most notably to the Abbey Church in Hildesheim and the Speyer Cathedral. The southern apse of the rotunda was incorporated into the eastern transept of the new church because it housed the tomb of Saint Wenceslas, who had by now become the patron saint of the Czech princes. A bishop's mansion was also built south of the new church, and was considerably enlarged and extended in the mid-12th century. The Gothic Cathedral. The present-day Gothic Cathedral was founded on November 21, 1344, when the Prague bishopric was raised to an archbishopric. Its patrons were the chapter of cathedral, the Archbishop Ernest of Pardubice, and, above all, Charles IV, King of Bohemia and a soon-to-be Holy Roman Emperor, who intended the new cathedral to be a coronation church, family crypt, treasury for the most precious relics of the kingdom, and the last resting place cum pilgrimage site of patron Saint Wenceslas. The first master builder was a Frenchman, Matthias of Arras, summoned from the papal palace in Avignon. Matthias designed the overall layout of the building as, basically, an import of French Gothic, a triple-naved basilica with flying buttresses, short transept, 5-bayed choir and decagon apse with ambulatory and radiating chapels. However, he lived to build only the easternmost parts of the choir, the arcades and the ambulatory. The slender verticality of late French Gothic and clear, almost rigid respect of proportions distinguish his work today. After Matthias' death in 1352, a new master builder took over the cathedral workshop. This was Peter Parler, at that time only 23 years old and son of the architect of the Heilig Kruismaar 1/4 NSTER in Schwarkarency Bischgme 1/4 ND. Parler at first only worked according to the plans left by his predecessor, building the sacristy on the north side of the choir and the chapel on the south. Once he finished all that Matthias left unfinished, he continued according to his own ideas. Parler's bold and innovative design brought in a unique new synthesis of Gothic elements in architecture. This is best exemplified in the vaults he designed for the choir. The so-called Parler's vaults or net vaults have double diagonal ribs that span the width of the choir bay. The crossing pairs of ribs create a net-like construction, which considerably strengthens the vault. They also give a lively ornamentation to the ceiling, as the interlocking vaulted bays create a dynamic zigzag pattern down the length of the cathedral. While Matthias of Arras was schooled as a geometer, thus putting an emphasis on rigid systems of proportions and clear, mathematical compositions in his design, Parler was trained as a sculptor and woodcarver. He treated architecture as a sculpture, almost as if playing with structural forms in stone. Aside from his rather bold vaults, the peculiarities of his work can also be seen in the design of pillars, the ingenious stone vault of New St. Wenceslaus Chapel, the undulating clerestory walls, the original window tracery and the blind tracery panels of the buttresses. Architectural sculpture was given a considerable role while Pala was in charge of construction, as can be seen in the corbels, the passageway lintels, and, particularly, in the busts on the triforium, which depict faces of the royal family, saints, Prague bishops, and the two master builders, including Pala himself. Work on the cathedral, however, proceeded rather slowly, because in the meantime the emperor commissioned Pala with many other projects, such as the construction of the new Charles Bridge in Prague and many churches throughout the Czech realm. By 1397, when Peter Pala died, only the choir and parts of the transept were finished. After Peter Pala's death in 1399, his sons, Wenzel Pala and particularly Johannes Pala, continued his work. They in turn were succeeded by a certain Master Patriarch, who by all accounts was also a member of Pala's workshop. Under these three masters, the transept and the great tower on its south side were finished. So was the gable which connects the tower with the south transept. Nicknamed Golden Gate, it is through this portal that the kings entered the cathedral for coronation ceremonies. The entire building process came to a halt with the beginning of Hussite War in the first half of 15th century. The war brought an end to the workshop that operated steadily over for almost a century, and the furnishings of cathedral, dozens of pictures and sculptures, suffered heavily from the ravages of Hussite iconoclasm. As if this was not enough, a great fire in 1541 considerably damaged the cathedral. St. Wenceslas Chapel. Perhaps the most outstanding place in the cathedral is the chapel of Saint Wenceslas, where the relics of the saint are kept. The room was built by Peter Pala between 1344 and 1364 and has a ribbed vault. The lower part of the walls are wonderfully decorated with over 1,300 semi-precious stones and paintings about the Passion of Christ dating from the original decoration of the chapel in 1372–1373. The upper part of the walls have paintings about the life of Saint Wenceslas, created by the master of the light Omer Angstrom unregistered trademark ice altarpiece between 1506 and 1509. In the middle of the wall there is a Gothic statue of Saint Wenceslas created by Jindřich Pala in 1373. The chapel is not open to the public, but it can be viewed from the doorways. A small door with 7 locks, in the southwestern corner of the chapel, leads to the crown chamber containing the Czech crown jewels, which are displayed to the public only once every 8 years. Renaissance and Baroque, through most of the following centuries, the cathedral stood only half-finished. It was built up to the great tower and a transept, which was closed by a provisional wall. In the place of a 3-aisled nave to be built, a timber-roofed construction stood, and services were held separately there from the interior of the choir. Several attempts to continue the work on cathedral were mostly unsuccessful. In the latter half of 15th century, King Vladislav's Julian commissioned the great Renaissance Gothic architect Benedict Wright to continue the work on the cathedral, but almost as soon as the work began, it was cut short because of lack of funds. Later attempts to finish the cathedral only brought some Renaissance and Baroque elements into the Gothic building, most notably the obviously different Baroque spire of the South Tower and the great organ in the northern wing of transept. Completion in 19th and 20th century. In 1844 Varslavp Ina, an energetic Saint Vitus canon, together with neo-Gothic architect Joseph Cranach presented a program for renovation and completion of the great cathedral at the gathering of German architects in Prague. The same year a society under the full name Union for Completion of the Cathedral of Saint Vitus in Prague was formed, whose aim was to repair, complete and get rid of everything mutilated and stylistically inimical. Joseph Cranach was heading what was mostly repair work from 1861 to 1866, getting rid of Baroque decorations deemed unnecessary and restoring the interior. In 1870 the foundations of the new nave were finally laid, and in 1873, after Kramer's death, architect Joseph Mocker took over the reconstruction. It was he who designed the west facade in a typical classic Gothic manner with two towers, and the same design was adopted, after his death, by the third and final architect of restoration, Camille Hilbert. In the 1920s the sculptor Wojciech Szada worked on the facade, and the famous Czech Art Nouveau painter Alphonse Mucha decorated the new windows in the north part of nave. The rose window was designed by František Kyselá in 1925 July. This rose window above the portal depicts scenes from the biblical story of creation. By the time of Saint Wenceslas' Jubilee in 1929, the Saint Vitus Cathedral was finally finished, nearly 600 years after it was begun. Despite the fact that entire western half of cathedral is a neo-Gothic addition, much of the design and elements developed by Peter Parler were used in the restoration, giving the cathedral as a whole a harmonious, unified look. Influence. The Cathedral of Saint Vitus had a tremendous influence on the development of late Gothic style characteristic for Central Europe. Members of Parler workshop, and indeed, the Parler clan designed numerous churches and buildings across Central Europe. More notable examples include Stephansdom Cathedral in Vienna, Strasbourg Cathedral, Church of St. Marko in Zagreb and the Church of St. Barbara in Kutna Hora, also in Czech Republic. Regional Gothic styles of Slovenia, northern Croatia, Austria, Czech Republic, and southern Germany were all heavily influenced by Parler design. Of particular interest are Parler's net vaults. The late Gothic of Central Europe is characterized by ornate and extraordinary vaulting, a practice which was started by Parler's development of his own vaulting system for the choir of St. Vitus Cathedral. Another regional Gothic style also displays amazing ingenuity and ornamentation in the design of vaults, the perpendicular style of English Gothic. A question remains of what was influenced by what. Some British art and architecture historians suspected that Peter Parler might have travelled to England at some point in his life, studying the great English Gothic cathedrals, which then inspired his work on St. Vitus. However, taking into account that the perpendicular style and the use of truly extravagant vaults in English Gothic began at the very end of 14th century, it is also quite possible that it was St. Vitus Cathedral of Prague that influenced the development of English Gothic. Newest history. In 1997, with 1000th anniversary of Saint Wojciech's death, the patrocinium of the church was re-extended to Saint Wenceslas and Saint Wojciechus. The previous Romanesque basilica had this triple patrocinium to the main Bohemian patrons since 1038 when relics of Saint Wojciechus were placed here. In 1954, a government decree entrusted the whole Prague Castle into ownership of all Czechoslovak people, and into administration of the President's office. Past the Velvet Revolution, since 1992, several petitions by church subjects were filed requiring to find which subject is really the owner. After 14 years, in June 2006, the city court in Prague decided that the 1954 decree didn't change the ownership of the cathedral and the owner is the Metropolitan chapter at Saint Vitus. In September 2006, the President's office had passed the administration to the Metropolitan chapter. However, in February 2007, the Supreme Court in Prague cancelled the decision of the city court and returned the case to the Common Court. In September 2007, the District Court of Praha 7 decided that the cathedral is owned by the Czech Republic. This decision was confirmed by the City Court in Prague and the Constitutional Court rejected the appeal of the Metropolitan chapter. The Metropolitan chapter wanted to file a complaint to the European Court for Human Rights. However, the interior equipment of the cathedral is unquestionably owned by the church subject. In May 2010, the new Prague Archbishop Dominik Duka and the state president Václav Klaus together declared that they don't want to continue with court conflicts. They constituted that the 7 persons who are traditionally holders of the keys of the St. Wenceslas chamber with the Bohemian crown jewels become also a board to coordinate and organize administration and use of the cathedral. However, controversy about ownership of some related canonry houses continues. Services. Regular religious services in the cathedral are, Sunday 08:30 Mass, 10:00 Mass and 17:00 Vespers, Monday 07:00 Mass, Tuesday 07:00 Mass, Wednesday 07:00 Mass, Thursday 07:00 Mass, Friday 0700 Mass, 1800 Mass, Saturday 0700 Mass, Confessions, Sunday 0930 Euro 1000, Friday 1730 Euro 1750. Gallery. Further reading, Fualakova, Eli Carr, Martin Halata, Klara Halmanova, PVEL Skufla. Prague Castle in photographs /1956-1900. Prague, Sprava 3/4 scar copyright Horadu a Nakladatalstvakant, 2005. ISBN 80-86217-94-9, Kapinia Ovska, P. Kotba, T. Dudek, M. Plasek, D. Brie, V. Razim. Architecture of the Gothic, Volume 2 of 10 Centuries of Architecture Series, Prague Castle Administration and Dardar, A.S., Prague 2001, ISBN 80-86161-41-2. See also: Treasury of Saint Vitus Cathedral, Czech Gothic architecture, St. George's Basilica, Prague. References. External links: website of the Cathedral, Archdiocese of Prague, information from the Prague Castle Administration site, photographs, church art including Bath and St. Vitus Cathedral Street Vitus Cathedral Picture Gallery at Remains Say.